Picture this. You wake up one morning, make your coffee, check your phone, and everything costs more. Your grocery bill, your gas, your electricity. Products are missing from shelves. Factories in Europe start shutting down. Flights get canceled. And the reason? A body of water most people couldn't even find on a map just closed. That's not fiction. That's exactly what experts say would happen if the South China Sea shut down even for a few weeks. Before we get into this, if you're new here, hit that like button right now and subscribe. We cover the geopolitical stories that actually affect your wallet, your job, and your daily life. Seriously, smash that like and subscribe button before we go any further. This one's going to change how you see the world. Now, let's talk about this water. The South China Sea sits between Southeast Asia and the Pacific. On a map, it doesn't look like much. But what moves through it? That's where it gets wild. Roughly 1/3 of all global shipping passes through this stretch of ocean every single year. We're not talking about a little regional cargo traffic. We're talking about the arteries of the entire global economy. About 40% of the world's crude oil travels through these waters. About 34% of all liquefied natural gas. And it handles nearly 30% of all container shipping on the planet. Think about what that means for you sitting in London, Dallas, or Sydney. The smartphone in your pocket, the fuel in your car, the price of your electricity bill this winter. All of it is directly connected to ships moving through that water right now. And here's something most people don't realize. Over 64% of China's maritime trade passes through the South China Sea. For Japan, it's nearly 42%. Even the United States, which is geographically far removed, has more than 14% of its maritime trade tied to these routes. So when politicians argue about islands and territorial claims, they're not just arguing about rocks. They're arguing about who controls the most economically critical stretch of ocean on Earth. Now here's the question nobody wants to answer out loud. What actually happens if it closes? Let's start with energy, because that hits first and hardest. In 2023 alone, 10 billion barrels of petroleum products passed through the South China Sea. 10 billion. If that flow stops, even partially, every country that imports oil starts scrambling. Prices spike overnight. Not slowly. Overnight. We already saw a preview of this. When the Red Sea faced shipping disruptions in 2024, JP Morgan estimated that those disruptions alone added 0.7% to global core goods inflation. That was one alternate route in one part of the world. The South China Sea carries magnitudes more traffic. The knock-on effect would be incomparably worse. But it's not just oil. It's food. About 21% of globally traded soybeans pass through this region. Soybeans feed livestock. Livestock becomes meat. Meat goes to your supermarket. A closure doesn't just make fuel expensive. It makes your weekly food shop feel like a luxury. And then there's the manufacturing chain. Electronics, car parts, medical equipment. Most of it moves through Southeast Asian supply lines that feed directly into the South China Sea. Rerouting a single vessel adds roughly $1 million in additional voyage costs. Multiply that across thousands of ships, and those costs land in one place, on the consumer. On you. Here's the uncomfortable truth that governments in Washington, London, and Canberra don't say loud enough. There is no clean backup plan. The alternate routes exist through the Lombok Strait around the southern tip of Australia, but they add days, sometimes weeks to journeys. The world's shipping infrastructure wasn't built for that. Conflict in the region could trigger GDP losses of between 10 and 33% for countries like Taiwan, Singapore, Vietnam, and the Philippines. That economic shockwave doesn't stay in Asia. Crosses every ocean. We're standing at a point in history where this is no longer a theoretical exercise. Tensions in the South China Sea are the highest they've been in decades. And most people have no idea what's actually at stake. So we've established what moves through the South China Sea and why losing it would gut the global economy. But now let's go deeper, because the real story isn't just about ships and cargo. It's about power. And who's playing for keeps. China has been methodically building artificial islands in the South China Sea for over a decade. Not tiny outposts. Full military installations, runways, radar systems, missile platforms. China has militarized several of these artificial islands, installing missile systems, radar facilities, and military aircraft. They didn't do that to protect fishing boats. They did it to control the most valuable highway on the planet. And the legal situation? It's a mess. In 2016, the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague ruled against China's territorial claims, stating that China's actions violated the Philippines' sovereign rights. China refused to acknowledge the decision and continues asserting its claims through military presence. So you have one of the world's largest military powers ignoring an international court ruling, while physically building bases on contested water. That's not a diplomatic dispute. That's a slow-motion takeover of a global trade artery. Now here's where it gets personal for American, British, and Australian audiences. The United States has been conducting what it calls freedom of navigation operations in the South China Sea for years, sending warships through waters China claims as its own. Every single one of those operations is a potential flashpoint. One miscalculation, one aggressive intercept, one moment where someone on either side makes the wrong call, and you're not looking at a trade disruption anymore. You're looking at a conflict between nuclear-armed powers. Australia sits in a particularly exposed position. The South China Sea directly links Australia to its largest trading partners, China, Japan, South Korea, and the entire ASEAN bloc. Australian iron or coal, agricultural products, they all depend on these lanes staying open. If you're in Sydney or Melbourne right now, this isn't a distant geopolitical story. This is directly tied to your export economy and your cost of living. Britain, post-Brexit, has been pushing into the Indo-Pacific harder than at any point since the Cold War. The HMS Queen Elizabeth carrier group sailed through these contested waters. That wasn't a coincidence. That was a statement. And statements in this part of the world carry real risk. Here's what the think tanks and the economists are quietly worried about but rarely say in plain language. The world has no real contingency for a sustained South China Sea closure. Supply chains have been optimized for efficiency, not resilience. Just-in-time manufacturing means there are no warehouses full of backup stock. No giant reserve of components sitting somewhere waiting to be deployed if ships stop moving. Companies are diversifying supply chains and governments are strengthening alternative partnerships. But these adjustments carry real efficiency and competitiveness costs. In other words, even the preparation for a potential disruption is already making goods more expensive. The uncertainty alone is costing the global economy money right now. And that cost lands on ordinary people, not on governments, not on corporations who adjust their margins, on the family filling up at the petrol station, the small business owner importing parts, the retiree watching energy bills eat into a fixed pension. The South China Sea is not a story about China and its neighbors. It's a story about how fragile the system holding up your daily life actually is, and how few people in power are being straight with you about it. The water hasn't closed yet, but the conditions that could close it are building. And when something this connected to everything breaks, it doesn't send a warning. It just breaks. If this opened your eyes to something the mainstream news isn't covering clearly, share this video. Send it to someone who thinks geopolitics doesn't affect them, because it already does every single day. Like the video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss what's coming next. This is exactly the kind of story we cover here, and there's a lot more where this came from.